The Atlanta Braves released their NRI list for spring training, and who is not invited is really interesting. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, your daily source for news, notes, and updates on your Atlanta Braves. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, award-winning baseball writer and podcaster. You can follow me on social media at Crosby Baseball, and you can find all of my written work, bravestoday.com. That's the Braves Today Substack, as this is both a podcast and a newsletter. We're proudly part of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. Download the FanDuel app or go to fanduel.com to get started. I want to talk about Atlanta's representatives in the World Baseball Classic. We've got more players than we expected, 4 different players on rosters. I'm going to talk about what that could mean for the Braves in 2026. But before I do that, the team put out the list of non-roster invitees for spring training just a few days ago. And in addition to all 40 members of the 40-man roster, they're also bringing 24 other players into camp. Now, not all of these players have a chance to win a job on opening day, but you can kind of break these guys into some tiers, and it's really interesting to understand why they're there and what their odds are of actually making the roster. So let's go through these names, and let's talk about why they're in camp and what should we expect from them in 2026. And the first group of guys I want to talk about is not the top prospects. We're going to get to them, right? J.R. Ritchie coming to camp. We're going to talk about these guys. But tier 1 for me are the players who could legitimately force a real roster decision. You know, we have favorites at just about every position, but a few of these guys do legitimately have a chance, maybe an outside one, but a legitimate chance at breaking into that 26-man opening day roster. So pitchers is one of the main areas here. Martin Perez, James Karinchak, Ian Hamilton. Let's talk about these 3 guys. Perez signed a minor league deal just last week, and I talked about this a little bit earlier this week when I talked about Bryce Elder versus Chris Bassett and Lucas Giolito. But Martin Perez is a guy that can legitimately make spring training a little bit uncomfortable for the front office. Because if you think about right now from the 40-man roster, your expected situation for the rotation is Chris Sale, Spencer Schwellenbach, Spencer Strider, Ronaldo Lopez as your 1 through 4. And then either Bryce Elder or Hurston Waldrop as your number 5. If you look at this strictly from a preserving depth standpoint, Elder would be your number 5, and Hurston Waldrop would be in Gwinnett. But the Braves have been willing to take the optionable guy and put him into the opening day lineup simply because he was so good in spring training. Last year, AJ Smith-Shawver makes the rotation out of for opening day because he pitches so well during spring training. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that Hurston Waldrop makes the roster over Bryce Elder. But Martin Perez has the possibility of making things complicated. 34 years old, he'll be 35 in April, soon after the season starts. And he has been an all-star in the past, although he's not really come back to that same level of performance. In 2022, his first year in Texas at age 31, he had a 2.89 ERA and a 3.26 FIP, went 12-8 through a complete game shutout, and 196 innings. Since then, he's never had that same level of performance. 23, he had a 4.45 ERA, 4.99 FIP. 2024, between Pittsburgh and San Diego, he had a 4.53 ERA and a 4.90 FIP. And then last year for Chicago, a 3.54 ERA, but only 10 starts and a 4.24 FIP. So like his ERA estimators, FIP, Sierra, expected ERA, all that stuff, have him somewhere in the mid fours, right? He is a number 5 starter. Zips this year has him as a number 5 starter. The projection's a 4.46 ERA, a 4.45 FIP. He does a lot of the stuff that Jeremy Hefner likes. He throws all 3 fastballs. He has both the curveball and a slider. He has a changeup. And he's averaged 93 as like before these injuries the last 2 seasons. I mean, the last 2 years, Martin Perez has combined for 190 innings in the last 2 seasons combined because of multiple different injuries. When he's healthy, he's throwing 93 or so, which is good enough. And he's a perfectly acceptable number 5 option. I don't think it's very likely that he jumps in front of a Bryce Elder or a Herson Waldrop. But if he pitches really, really well, he has the potential to make this conversation awkward, right? To make it uncomfortable for the front office, especially if he has an opt-out in his deal where we can't just stash him in Gwinnett. Because you could see, if he's fully healthy and he doesn't have a very early opt-out, you could see where the Braves could stick him in Gwinnett and add him to the 40-man roster and the 26-man roster when they need a guy in Atlanta in April or May or whatever. But if he has an opt-out before that, or even in spring training, it could be a little bit uncomfortable for the front office. I still don't think it's going to be Perez. It'll be probably Bryce Elder. Again, maybe they go with Herson Waldrop, but it's probably going to be Bryce Elder. Maybe it's Grant Holmes. If he looks fantastic and they just think that Bryce Elder will work out in relief and they stick Grant Holmes in the rotation instead. I still think he'd be better as a utility pitcher. But the other guys here, James Karinchak and Ian Hamilton. We've talked about both these relievers a little bit recently. Karinchak's had ERAs close to 2 when he was part of Cleveland's bullpen. If he looks like the pre-2023 James Karinchak, he had and you see some stumbles from the existing bullpen, right? I'm thinking about that middle to back end there, the Joel Pyomps, the Joey Wentz, that kind of area. There's an avenue to add James Karinchak as a medium leverage arm to open 26. Ian Hamilton, same situation. I don't know if he does enough, right? When he was with the Yankees, it was sinker slider, a little bit of four-seam fastball, but usually just sinker slider. He's thrown as high, he's averaged like 96 in 2024. It was down to 95 last year. I think I probably have him behind a couple of the other bullpen options simply because he just has sinker slider fastball and that's it. Usually most relievers are throwing 2 or 3 pitches, but under this coaching staff, not having anything exemplary to fall back on means you need to have multiple different options, and he just doesn't offer that. You could see how it could work out, though. Position players. You've got a couple catchers and a couple utility men battling here. This is, again, all tier 1, guys who legitimately could make the roster. The final bench spot, Luke Williams, Aaron Schunk. We all know who Luke Williams is at this point. He's been on the Braves roster portions of like 2 or 3 different seasons. He's a dominant relief pitcher. He was the guy Atlanta used last year, if you're not familiar with that joke. The guy Atlanta used last year in a lot of blowouts. He came in and pitched. Like, for the Braves last year, he took 6 innings for Atlanta. 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, only 2 runs allowed. So an ERA of 3. He actually was worth positive WAR as a pitcher for the Braves last year. It was only 0.1, but he still earned WAR for the Braves as a pitcher last year, surprisingly. So that's the joke there. He probably is the favorite over Aaron Schunk simply because of the familiarity in Atlanta. Schunk is from the area. He went to the Lovett School in Atlanta, University of Georgia, was taken in 2019 second round by Colorado. Like, he's a local kid, but Luke Williams is a known quantity for the clubhouse, a known quantity, what he can offer defensively, offensively, pinch hitting, relief pitching, whatever. And Williams is probably more disposable than Shunk. And by that, what I mean is you have two guys on minor league deals. If you add Williams and you need to DFA him, you're probably going to be able to sign him back in the minors, right? It could be a situation like Jesse Chavez. You DFA Jesse Chavez and he signs back anyway. Aaron Shunk, if you end up needing to DFA him, he probably goes somewhere else because he has the pedigree of a former second-round pick, all that stuff. And so, if you consider them roughly equal, Williams is the one that you add first, because if you have to swap to the other one, you don't care. It's a weird explanation, but this is kind of how they think about some of these things, so just work with me here. On the catchers, Chadwick Tromp, Sandy Leon. Unless Atlanta signs somebody, odds are one of these two makes the roster. Unless Atlanta adds another catcher, and that probably depends on Sean Murphy's rehab. If they find out that Sean Murphy's going to be out later than mid-May, they might go and sign an actual catcher with offensive potential. But unless that happens, you're going to see Chadwick Tromp or Sandy Leon. Both men are known quantities. They've played in the majors for Atlanta. They've been in Gwinnett for Atlanta. Tromp has more time in the organization than Leon. Sandy Leon has a lot of familiarity with Drake Baldwin. They were together in Gwinnett in 2024 and then late last year. And Baldwin's talked about how much Leon has helped him grow as a catcher. So you can see arguments for both. I genuinely don't think at the end of the day it matters which one you have. You're going to play Drake Baldwin as much as possible until Sean Murphy's back. In just a minute, let's talk about guys who have a path, but they would need a lot of help to make the roster. There's some position players, there's some relievers, there's some starters. We'll break all these guys down next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Grand Slam Getaways. If you've ever dreamed of the ultimate baseball road trip, this is the ad for you. Grand Slam Getaways. They have bucket list baseball bus trips designed by fans for fans who love the game and want to travel in style. There's 3 trips being offered this year. They're going to Florida in May. They're going in June to the Midwest. They're going in July to the Northeast. They're all timed to match up with Braves road games. You'll get at least 2 Braves road games on these trips, as well as field level tickets to those and non-Braves games, 3-star hotels, daily breakfast, tons of other activities, appearances by former MLB players, giveaways, side trips like the Louisville Slugger Museum or the Bull Durham filming locations. It makes a great gift. If you're retired, it's a fantastic way to spend some time traveling in comfort with fellow Braves fans. You're just a baseball nut and you want to go see some of these cathedrals like PNC Park and and Camden Yards and all that stuff. Or parent-child summer adventures. I could see me and my son or me and my daughter doing this, taking a week-long road trip together as a bonding moment while they're out of school. So reserve your spot now with a small deposit. Go to grandslam-getaways.com to make this summer a Grand Slam. Check it out now. grandslam-getaways.com to let the baseball adventures begin. Welcome back to Braves Today. Let's talk about the tier 2 of the non-roster invitees, right? The guys that could make the majors if something bad happens, right? They're there, but they need help. Looking at some of the starters, Carlos Carrasco is invited to spring training. He can provide veteran innings, immediate depth, but he hasn't had an ERA or a FIP below like 4.93 since 2022. I do want to point out that 2022 season was with Jeremy Hefner, so maybe there's something there, but he's another fifth starter candidate. Eliezer Hernandez probably falls in that same boat. He's a swingman, really. He's been in the majors and Korea's KBO, was back and forth. He's more of a project than a 2025 option, but he is a piece that you could add if you lose multiple options during spring, bullpen, rotation, whatever. Javi Guerrero, Taylor Scott, interesting arms, but they're going to go to Gwinnett. barring multiple injuries in Atlanta's bullpen to start the season. On the position player side, you've got a couple outfielders that are probably your favorites to be the backup to backup outfielder Eli White, right? Jose Azocar, Ben Gamel. Like, Azocar's got speed and defense in his favor. Gamel is a guy, he's one of those, he can give you professional at-bats, but he's kind of a jack of all trades, master of none. And so with Eli White being healthy, it's really hard to see how either one of them could project out to take the final bench spot. Like, especially Gamel. Because if you don't have a standout tool that can translate to a specific role, and you don't have infield versatility, which Gamel doesn't, it's hard to see why you would give that guy the final spot over somebody like Luke Williams, who can also play corner outfield and all of that too, plus do the infield stuff. Luke Waddell is in here invited. He's the infield version of Ben Gamel, right? Adequate at a bunch of different spots. He's not the top option for any of them. And so, like, it's just hard to see a role that he would play. He would be on the bench in the final spot and not get in games for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. These guys aren't camp filler, but they're reactive depth, right? They're not proactive solutions to making the roster better. They are reactive depth if something terrible happens to the guys in front of them, right? Like, if Eli White goes down, Azocar or Gamel one of them probably makes the roster as your backup outfielder, right? But that's it. Tier 3 is where it gets really interesting. These are the developmental or evaluation invites. These are the guys that they're future starters for the Braves. You want to get eyes on them in camp, right? John Heel and Alex Lodis, the two shortstop prospects, they come to mind here. They're going to go to the lower minors this year, right? They're probably some combination of high A or double A. I'd imagine high A probably for both of them. They probably rotate at shortstop or something. John Heel has batted ball profile issues. Lodis has some swing decisions he has to fix. We talked about that a little bit with Gorov yesterday. And I've got a newsletter coming out next week about Lodis in detail and what he needs to work on. They're going to spend some time learning from Matt Olson and Austin Riley and Ronald Acuña Jr. and stuff before they go down. Pitchers. J.R. Ritchie, Owen Murphy, Garrett Bowman. They're all same kind of situation. They could be a factor down the road. Ritchie as soon as this season, but they're not expected to break camp with the team, right? Like, these are going to be at best late in the season options, or for Murphy or Bowman, probably 27 at the earliest, right? Ritchie could be up anytime this year. Who knows? You do have some upper minors pieces as well, some infielders and some outfielders that are developmental invites. Jim Jarvis, Tristan English. They have future roles as depth infielders, utility pieces. Jarvis can play shortstop. English plays all the non-shortstop positions in the infield. They're going to go to AAA to start the year, and they are your next wave of Luke Williams, Mauricio Dubon type utility guys, right? Outfield, Brewer Hicklin, Deshaun Kersey Jr., they have combined for 125 plate appearances in the minors. These are, if you need a major league starter down the road, later this season, next season, you're going to stash them in Gwinnett all year. They give you a little bit of major league experience to be a backup outfielder. Think about JP Martinez. Think about Carlos Rodriguez. How they hung out in Gwinnett all year. JP Martinez got up for a little bit. Carlos Rodriguez never did. That's the same role Hicklin and Kersey are going to have, right? They're going to be in Gwinnett. They're going to have an opportunity to, if disaster happens, compete for a backup spot. But they're here to be evaluated to see what kind of future they have. And then you have a couple guys that are emergency-only depth. Austin Pope, he's going to be somebody's catch partner. He'll take road innings late in games when they go to Sarasota to take on the Orioles, Fort Myers to take on the Red Sox, Tampa to take on the Yankees, whatever. Jair Camargo is catching depth. You need a bunch of catchers early in camp. It's pitchers and catchers reporting. He'll catch bullpens. He'll catch live ABs. He'll do side work with veterans and things like that. He won't get into a bunch of games for Atlanta. But who wasn't invited is really, really interesting. Let's talk about that, and then the Braves guys who will report early so they can go be in the World Baseball Classic. We'll do that next, right here on Braves Today. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Fantrax. This is the best fantasy baseball platform on the market. Doesn't matter if you're doing Dynasty, you're doing Redraft, whatever it might be. I've used a bunch of different fantasy baseball apps, and I can't get over how great Fantrax is to use. The player pool is the deepest I have ever seen. If you're an open universe Dynasty thing, meaning you can take players from college, from overseas, whatever, those guys are in the player pool on Fantrax. You can grab KBO players. Carter Stewart, former Braves first-round pick that wasn't signed, is in the KBO and probably going to come back for the 27 season and sign with an MLB team. You can go grab him in Fantrax right now. He's in the player pool. If you forget to set your lineups, you get a notification on your phone if you have a position player who's not in the lineup that day, but he's in your lineup on your fantasy team, they'll ping you to let you know. Same thing if you have a starter on the bench who is expected to start that day, but you have him on the bench, they'll ping you and let you know to change your lineup before first pitch. And if you're the commissioner, the customization options are insane. So Fantrax, Fantrax.com/Braves Today is how you sign up. Again, Fantrax.com/Braves Today. Final segment of Braves Today, Lindsay Crosby. Let's talk about the guys who were not invited to spring training, because there's a couple names here that really kind of surprised me. Couple position players, couple pitchers who either in the prospect pitching ETA piece I wrote and podcasted about last week, or just from talking to people, folks I expected to be there that are not, right? On the pitching side, a couple names that I thought I would see. I mentioned that when you looked at the prospects who were invited, guys, tier 3, the developmental evaluation invite kind of guys, J.R. Ritchie, Owen Murphy, Garrett Bowman are all there. Blake Burkhalter and Lucas Braun were not there. And that's kind of surprising to me. Burkhalter's actually been to spring training before. He blew out, needed Tommy John, pitching against the Yankees in spring training. I've confirmed he's now going to exclusively be a reliever. They are pulling the plug on the starting pitching experiment for Blake Burkhalter. So, given that they have so many relief options on the 40-man roster, I mean, if you think about, you have all the guys expected to make it, you have those two competitors like a Karinchak and Hamilton, but then you've got other guys who, could be called up during the course of the season. Didier Fuentes, who again not Didier Fuentes, Giancarlos Lara, who is a reliever. Jose Suarez can do both. You've got Dylan Dodd, you've got Hayden Harris, you've got Daysbel Hernandez, you've got Hunter Stratton. It makes sense they didn't invite Blake Burkhalter, right? They see him as a reliever. They're going to give him more time to get back to working as a reliever in Gwinnett before he's a call-up option. You could see him later this year. Lucas Braun, this one was surprising. I had him down as a 2026 starting pitcher ETA when I wrote that piece and did that podcast last week. He, between 24 and 25, he's thrown 293 in a third innings in the minors. So from a workload capacity, which we know Atlanta cares about, from a workload capacity, he's absolutely already there. He can handle a full season workload, which has been their big thing. They've wanted to make sure that they stack innings on these guys. But he only has 3 starts in AAA. And if you look at the way that he does things, the pure stuff isn't actually all that good, right? He's throwing all 3 fastballs, a sweeper, a curveball, a changeup. But he's in the low 90s on his fastball. The changeup's kind of useful against lefties, but nothing is very, very good. He's getting by on sequencing and locations. And the fact that he's Rule 5 eligible after this season, but they didn't invite him, tells me that they maybe view him like they viewed a Darius Vines, right? An Allen Winans, a guy that if you need him for an emergency spot start or two, you can call him up, but that he's not a significant piece of a contending Braves roster going forward. Think about Winans and Vines. Vines, they use him a little bit as a starter, then they use him a little bit as a reliever, then they DFA'd him. Nobody claimed him, and he's still in Atlanta's system, but was not an NRI this year, right? He's still pitching in Atlanta's minors. Although last year, he missed most of the season due to injury. He was signed to Double-A, but either way, he was DFA'd in July 2024, and nobody picked him up. They just outrighted him to the minors. It tells me that Lucas Braun's in a similar situation, that they don't see him, they see him being a useful piece to cover a game or two, but he's not, they don't see him as a potential major league starter, even as a fifth guy. When you look at position players, David McCabe, similar situation. They did not protect him from the Rule 5 draft. They didn't invite him to spring training, right? Tristan English is the guy who's going to play a bunch of first base as a backup instead. And he had arguably his best season last year. When you look at what David McCabe did, he was healthy for the full year, right? He hit .275 with a .794 OPS, 14 home runs, but in 133 games, and he showed that he really can't be a third baseman. And so he's a first base DH type that is an on-base focused profile without a lot of power. And that's just an atypical profile for Major League Baseball. There are a couple guys who are low power, high on-base first baseman. I'm thinking about Nathaniel Lowe or Lau. I don't remember which one he is. Nathaniel Lowe, right? Formerly of the Rangers, spent last year with Washington and with Boston. He has a 27 homer season in his career in 2022 with Texas, but outside of that, his high for home runs in a season is 18. He's run a career 347 on base. He had a 359 across his 4 years in Texas. He's just a high on base, career 264, contact-oriented, high on base first baseman. The guy the Angels have, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the one that debuted the same year that he was drafted. Nolan Schanuel. Similar situation. Not a ton of power, but a good on-base percentage, high batting average type of guy. There is a role for players like that in the majors, but it's not the conventional, Washington wasn't very good. Angels haven't been very good. It's hard to find a lot of winning World Series contending teams that use that profile at first base versus a power-oriented profile. So David McCabe not coming obviously tells me that they just don't necessarily think his profile is one that would be valuable to Atlanta or that can play in the majors. Again, and nobody else did either because they didn't take him in the Rule 5 draft, right? Jordan Groshans. I'm really surprised that he wasn't invited. He signed a minor league deal last week. Former first-round pick from 2018. Is a utility infielder, was drafted as a shortstop, but now has played a lot of non-shortstop in the infield. Played 17 games for Miami at third base in 2023. Has played second, has played first in the minors. Doesn't play a lot of shortstop anymore. But another guy kind of like Tristan English who can play all the non-shortstop positions. Surprised they didn't invite him to let him battle with Shunk and Luke Williams for the final spot on the bench. Maybe they think there's more development there, or maybe they just grabbed him because they needed somebody to man the position in Gwinnett. Just a little surprised that some of these guys were not invited, and it kind of tells you Atlanta's evaluation of their potential and whether or not, one, they can compete this year, and two, whether you need to get them the experience of the major leaguers for them to compete next year. I do think it's really interesting to see Atlanta's representatives of the World Baseball Classic. The Braves have 4 guys that are playing. We knew that Ronald Acuña Jr. was going to be on Team Venezuela. Like, we were all aware of that. He played center field for them the last time he went to the World Baseball Classic. And then when he came to Team US, like when he came back to the States, he ended up winning. I'm sorry, when he came back to the States. When he came over to the Braves after the WBC, he ended up winning MVP that year. So, like, I'm not necessarily just automatically against him playing. Given that they have Wilyer Abreu and Jackson Chourio on the squad with him, he's probably in right with Chourio in center and Abreu in left. So I'm not as worried about the work on his legs this spring. Outside of that, 3 other Braves are going to play for Team Netherlands, which is going to be coached by Andrew Jones. And I know a lot of people are kind of confused that Chadwick Tromp, Ozzie Albies, Jurickson Profar, none of them are from the Netherlands, but are going to play on Team Netherlands. Tromp is from Aruba, and both Profar and Albies and Andrew Jones are from Curacao. And both of those are constituent island countries of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So, like, they're both, Aruba is near Curacao, right north of South America, but those are all part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So anybody from those countries, and a good significant portion of these lineups are guys from those countries, can play for the Netherlands, right? Xander Bogaerts is going to be the shortstop for the Netherlands. He is also from Aruba. Jonathan Scope is on the team. He's from Curacao. Like Didi Gregorius, Andrelton Simmons has a role on this team. So all of those guys are going to play for the Netherlands in the WBC. And my hope here, I think the guy that I'm most excited about getting some additional at-bats early in the year is Ozzie Albies. Because if you look at what Ozzie did last year, we kind of talked about after the 2024 injury that ended his season early, he came back, but he wasn't switch hitting, wasn't fully healthy. That he just, the power production was not there. 157 games last year. He hit 240 with a 365 slug and 16 total home runs. Terrible. Like, that's terrible numbers. Absolutely absolutely opposite of what Ozzie's typically been able to do in his career. But if you look at how he did, the farther he got away from that injury that significantly impacted his 24 season. Like, in the second half of last year, Ozzie hit 272 with a 439 slug. His slug was 316 in the first half. He had no power in the first half. He had, I think, 7 home runs in like 95 games. The second half, he really started to pick it back up and looked closer to the Ozzie Albies that we know. His September was going great. He was hitting 282 with a 787 OPS and a 462 slug in September before he got hurt and missed the very end of the season. And that was a broken bone in his hand, whereas the 24 injury was, I believe, his wrist. And those bones in the hand typically heal a little better than the wrist ones do, and the effects don't linger as long. So my hope is that Ozzie's, 1, he's been feeling pretty healthy, and that 2, getting him into game action earlier this year, provided he can stay healthy, which is never a given for Ozzie, but provided he can stay healthy, means that maybe he's more locked into his swing when the season starts. Because I think more so than anybody else, Ozzie Albies is a guy, because of the injury to Ha-Seong Kim, you don't really have a lot of other options. They haven't been willing to play Eli White at second base. He did it a little bit in 24, very briefly, just a couple innings. They've given zero indication that Jurickson Profar is ever going to move back to the infield. Typically, when guys move from the infield to the outfield, it's for a reason, and they very rarely come back to the dirt. Mookie Betts is an exception, and everybody needs to kind of understand that's not a typical career path for a lot of guys. And so Ozzie's the guy where, like, sure, you could try Nacho. We've barely seen Nacho play second base in the majors or the minors. And when he last did it, he didn't look that great. Granted, he was learning on the fly. But, we just don't really have a lot of other options to replace Ozzie. Now, the free agency class at second base is really good next year. There's a lot of Jazz Chisholm, there's a lot of Brandon Lau. It's Nathaniel's Lowe, Brandon Lau. A lot of options at second base next year. But for 2026, until you get Ha-Seong Kim back, the Braves really need Ozzie to come out hitting. Because if you, yes, the 0-7 start last year really kind of put Atlanta behind the 8 ball. But having both Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies be 2 of the 5 worst qualified hitters in baseball in the first half absolutely helped keep you in that hole and make you have to dig out in the second half, which they weren't able to do when all the pitching injuries hit. So my hope is that, provided they can stay healthy, that Ozzie can maybe use the WBC to get confidence back in his swing, confidence back in his hand, and be the Ozzie Albies that I don't know if he's ever going to hit, 280 again? Be a silver slugger, but we at least need Ozzie to break 250. We at least need him to be, I don't think we're ever going to get the 30 homer Ozzie Albies back, but can he hit 20? Can he hit 25 maybe? We need that guy back, especially if he continues to show the lower strikeout and higher walk rates that he did last year. They're still not great walk rates, right? He was 8.2% last year, career high, right below MLB average. But his strikeout rate was a career low 14.1%. If we can get that Ozzie back, but he can also hit for a little more power, that goes a really long way towards lengthening this lineup. So let's hope the WBC is helpful for Ozzie Albies. Those games will start in early April, and I'm going to be tuned in to just about every single one that I can manage with the time changes. This has been Braves Today for Friday, February 6th. Do us a favor, like the video, subscribe, check out bravestoday.com. Subscriptions over there, free and paid, help us fund all of this stuff and what we do on a daily basis. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.